Hi there. This is Jonathan at the piano lesson. Nice to metaphorically see you again. And I wanted to share a story, a brief story with you about something that I think is very important. Um, of all the things, all the reasons why we play music and study music, setting aside all the notes and the scales and the chords and the technical things that we study, the most important thing is beauty. And in music, we're telling stories. Music is telling a story in sound over time. And the most important thing is creating beauty of tone and experiencing the beauty of tone. And when you teach music, the joy of inculcating a appreciation for beauty. And the concept of beauty is very abstract, right? And it's not quite as apparent on the piano. If you play a trumpet or a clarinet or a violin, you will probably sound pretty ugly in the beginning, right? Because if you ever tried to play any of those instruments, just producing a sound is problematic. And so your teacher, right, helps to guide you to develop your ear, develop a sense of what is a beautiful sound. Now on the piano, it's, as I'm sure you've all found out, it's a lot more complicated than just pressing down a key to make a beautiful tone. And again, what that word beauty means, and it's not just making one note that's beautiful, right? But going from note to note to note to note. So it's not just what note you play, but how you play it. And this is a very hard subject for me to get across to people, especially now when I think that all sense of beauty has been really obliterated from the digital world. It's very hard to get that across. I've had a lot of students that start on electric pianos, and it's a convenience, but to get across to them that they're not actually playing the piano. It's an electronic approximation of the piano, but it really has nothing to do with the piano. And people spend a lifetime just trying to create a beautiful tone. So my story, I had to play for an event last weekend, and at the event there was a woman in her 80s who wanted to play a few songs, and they didn't have a piano, and so I brought a keyboard. And typically when I play keyboards, I never ever use the acoustic piano sound, because I find that I really can't make music on it. It's very limiting to me. I can use some other sounds, and I have some tricks to get across the musicality that I want to get across. And so very often I'll use the good old Fender Rhodes type sound. And I'm not a big fan of the Wurlitzer piano, never was, even back in the day when I played real Wurlitzer pianos. I always thought they were hideous. Yeah, they have like limited uses, but pretty much hideous, mainly because they have no sustain, okay? And they were also just horrible, impossible to tune. They had these metal reeds that you had to file, and they were awful. I mean, a lot of people romanticize these instruments. There's nothing to romanticize about them, although I own several and I really like them, but a lot of times I use a vibe sound, or I'll use a left-hand bass. I'll do like a split keyboard and play left-hand bass, have like an acoustic or electric bass sound and a vibe sound or electric piano sound. Sometimes I'll use effects, maybe a little bit of chorusing or phase shifting or something like that. And I have one keyboard that I use. It's a Yamaha synth, one of the, I think it's an MX-49. I only own it for one sound, and that's the flute sound. That's it. I have several keyboards, and I pretty much own them for like one or two sounds, and that's all there is. I think I have a Korg. I think it's the X50. Yeah, the X50, and there's like a handful of sounds on it that I will use, and that's it. Actually, I noticed online that there's a guy who plays in the modern version of Spyro Gyra's band who uses one. They have some pretty nice mallet sounds on them. They're not actually quite up to snuff in terms of like modern sampling and everything, but they're just kind of musical. And it's the only keyboard, by the way, that actually has what I would call full size or piano size keys. All these other keyboards, including my Yamaha, the keys are slightly thin. If you've ever noticed this in modern keyboards now, electric keyboards, they make the keys narrower than they ordinarily would be on a piano. It's very frustrating. So I've kept my X50s around because at least they're a decent, they're not a weighted key, but they're actually a pretty decent keyboard. So, and I also have a little Korg drum machine that I bring along, and kind of, when I grew up, we used to have one-man bands, and some guy would come into a bar with a guitar, and he'd play bass pedals and sing and whatever. But this particular drum machine I have, it's a more modern one. I forget which one it is exactly. You probably would recognize it. It looks kind of rustic. It's like a square box and has the lights light up on it. But there are actually real drum sounds in it, and it comes with a foot pedal, and you can do fills, and so it's kind of fun to, if you don't have a drummer on the gig, to bring it along. So I'm wandering a bit, but so this nice woman wanted to play some songs, and she has a beautiful piano at home. She's not used to playing keyboards, and she doesn't expect, she has no idea what to expect, and she comes and sits down, and she gets very upset because the music is just not sounding the way she had hoped it would sound. And she's, complaining how out of tune it sounds, and how there's like one E that she doesn't like, and so she looks up to me and she says, "This is not beautiful. This is not beautiful." And I said, "Look, I can't argue with you. You're right. It isn't beautiful." She was playing the acoustic electric sound, and I said, "Well, why don't we try a few other sounds?" So we tried a couple other sounds that were kind of a little more synthy, but a little bit more like a celeste or something like that. And she felt okay about it. The sound had some more sustain, and she got to be relaxed, and she felt okay about it. She was a little self-conscious. It was actually a party. It was kind of a memorial for someone who had passed away, and she was concerned that she wouldn't sound good enough. And I was like, "Look, this is a nice gesture, and you should do it." And apparently, the woman who passed away asked her to play before she passed away. So, but I will tell you that is a rarity for someone to say to me, "This doesn't sound beautiful." To me, that was, a confirmation of what I know to be very true. And I don't know how people tolerate these sounds. I don't know how people tolerate sounds other than, a real piano. And in fact, I had one student, very, very nice, young person who got along very well, and she was doing okay in her studies, but she just learning on a keyboard, and I'm trying to encourage the parents to get a keyboard. And finally they say, "Well, I'm not so sure if she really likes music, or really likes the piano, and we'll have to let her make a decision." And eventually they kind of quit. But I said, "Well, I don't know how she can make a decision whether or not she wants to play the piano, because she's never actually played the piano. She's played a keyboard." And I never heard back from them, and I don't know what they thought about that. But it just seems to me such a disservice, and people have no idea what I'm talking about. I feel like they just have no idea what it means to experience something that's beautiful. I mean, how many times during the week do you even hear the word beauty? And I don't mean in terms of like a fashion show, right? But, just nothing is beautiful that I experience other than I have to really go out of my way to find beauty. Of course, I can take a walk, right? Take a walk in the forest. I can go to the farmer's market and experience beauty there. You have people who are kind of craftspeople and have an intimate relationship with the produce that they grow or whatever they're producing, the bread or the cheese, and there's a certain subtlety, that you expect to get back. It's not just like white bread that you're getting in a store, right? That's not really food, okay? And it's the same thing with music. So, and it's very strange because not only is it very hard to get across the idea of beauty of tone, but it's even hard to get across an idea of what a song is. The students, younger people today, typically experience music from video games, which I guess is, nothing wrong with that. But it's not how I experienced music growing up. I experienced music on the radio, and no one listens to the radio anymore, or from records, right? Or from playing in bands. When I grew up, there were bands everywhere. I mean, everyone was playing live music. It was, crazy. And the songs that students bring to me, I want to teach them, and I certainly don't want to discourage them, but they're just not songs. I mean, they're just not music. They're kind of gibberish, really. I mean, and I actually have a collection of 100 songs that I put together over the years that I've used to teach relatively successfully with, that allow people a framework, kind of a safe, stable, consistent framework to develop a connection with the keyboard and build up a familiarity with some of the common patterns in music, and so that by the time we end up going into other repertoire, they have some connection with the keyboard. And typically I will use it with adults or maybe teenagers in some instances, but these are all songs that I think everyone should know. I mean, and I'm always frankly kind of shocked at how kids, like, they don't know nursery rhymes. Like, no one sings to them as a child. They don't know patriotic songs. They don't know basic classical songs. They have never heard Irish music, or because there's a whole variety of tunes in this collection I have, and they're all based on primary chords, and most of them in major keys, some are in the minor keys. And they're tunes that you can actually go through very quickly, and some students do. Some students like kind of blow through them, but typically most people kind of like drag along and do less than they're expected rather than more than they're expected. If you're studying with anyone, if you're doing anything in life, but if you're studying music, try to do more than someone expects of you rather than less. It's a good ethic, I think, in general, to do more than is expected of you. And so I'm always, I suppose, I kind of wonder what, if anything, people really want to learn anymore, because I don't think songs have any meaning. I don't think they have the same meaning that they did. I mean, I know every generation probably gripes, and my generation is probably no different, of course, but it is kind of baffling. It's just baffling to, I guess it's always been that way. Just that beauty is so low on the list. Turn on the internet or the TV or read the paper, or just going to restaurants, or there's so much that's so ugly, just outright ugly. And I guess people become conditioned to accept that, and because they just don't experience what it's like, to really be in an orchestra, to really be with real musicians. I mean, think about all of the varieties of sounds that are in an orchestra, and all the crazy instruments, bassoons and English horns and wacky things that people learn to play, in odd ways, but they're so invaluable. So that was my little rant this week, my little message that was kind of refreshing to see someone that really had a visceral revulsion to my electric piano, and I was kind of pleased about that. I think I sounded fine because I have my tricks and way of playing, and one of my favorite electronic sounds are vibe sounds. I love the vibes. I used to play mallet instruments in high school. I used to play vibes and marimba and xylophone and orchestral bells and glockenspiel and all kinds of stuff. But I never really got into being a good mallet player. Some guys can do that, and I just wasn't drawn to that particular. But I always loved the sound of mallet instruments. So I enjoy playing them on keyboard because now we have some excellent reproductions of them, and they're a little less complex. Again, they're not the real thing, right? I mean, they're not really that as beautiful, but compared to the complexity of the piano, I had a friend who was a great audio engineer, speaker designer, one of the people that helped build Electric Ladyland Studios in New York, which Jimi Hendrix played. And when he would build his speakers, he said, the real acid test was how did they sound with a piano? That was really what would make or break a speaker. If it sounded good with the piano, you knew you were doing okay, because the piano is just so complex, and I'm sure that no one has really. I don't care what sample you've heard in your life. There aren't any good electronic reproductions of pianos. The piano's just too highly complex. Now, what does it mean to have a good sound on the keyboard? Well, there's a few things, a few descriptions. Words aren't quite adequate, but to have a bell-like tone, right? The sound where you have maybe like a little bit of a kind of a metallic sound, but also like this sort of cushioned sound. So the way a piano makes its sound is by through a hammer that strikes a string, and the hammer is made of soft felt, which is made from wool, right? Like your wool socks, and the wool is treated, produced in a certain manner that gives it a certain resiliency, all right? And if you took a hammer that was designed to go on a Steinway piano and tried to play music with it, you wouldn't hear any tone because it would be too soft. And so the technicians and the piano builders go through a process of voicing where they take that hammer and they make it harder. But it's a very complicated process. They also have to have a concept of tone, and they harden the hammer at various points using different types of chemicals. They'll use, some people use sanding sealer, I guess, or they'll use acetone, I think, and they'll shape the hammer in a certain way. Some people shape it like an egg, some manufacturers have the fat end of the egg hitting the strings, some have the thin end of the egg hitting the strings, and the hammer has to hit perfectly squarely with the strings so you don't get odd artifacts and stress the action parts in the piano. And it's a whole thing. It's actually much more important in many ways than even tuning the piano. You really can't separate tuning from voicing. It really goes together. It's impossible to really tune a piano well if the piano's not voiced well. And modern pianos have very hard hammers. Typically, they're very bright. They're very difficult to control. It's very hard to do things dynamically because you just get like loud and nothing. The way again the concept of tone, the way pianos sound now, are overly strident, overly percussive, overly just overly bright, and that's not really how pianos were intended to sound. And I believe one of the main reasons, well, two reasons they sound that way. One is because that's what people have become conditioned to hear out of electronic instruments. And also, it's easier in a lot of ways to get that kind of a tone. It's much harder to build tone, and it's also harder to record that sound. It's really impossible. It's like taking a picture of an oil painting. You really can't do it. Okay, you can, the less fundamental frequencies and the less complexity you have in the sound, the easier it is to kind of capture. This particular piano that I'm sitting in front of, I kind of rebuilt it, and I used special materials in it and to give it its tone. And it took a long time to really coax out a sound from it. And fortunately, I knew some new people that could help me with that. And you know, just having you can listen to that sustain. I mean, that's almost, approaching what an organ might do, right? But how many times have we been on a piano where you play a note and it goes dong, right? You can't really do anything with that. I would say in general, no matter what you do on the piano, there are many different ways to play the piano, but probably the single worst way to play the piano that I definitely discourage people from doing is to take your arms and your hands and your fingers and force the keys down. You really never want to do that. Any other way is a possibility, but just not forcing the key down into the key bed. Okay. One instance is just kind of taking the arm, and you could go in an oblique manner and kind of land on the key, and what that does is it maximizes the tone and minimizes the percussiveness, the percussive attack of the piano, which can be very ugly, right? Because the dirty secret about the piano is that it is a percussion instrument, right? We have to fool people into thinking that it's not. But and being able to just what's called voice the piano, so that the melody, just on a simple two-dimensional level, so that the melody can come out. Right, so you have this on top, and in the bottom you have this two levels of dynamics. I wanted to talk about, I had this lesson I wanted to do about giant steps, and I might talk a little bit about that next week. If you guys haven't done giant steps at all, it's one of those tunes that everyone does. I'm kind of getting off on another subject now, and it's a very interesting tune. I think people end up playing it the same way, which is a bit puzzling considering how much potential the song has to interpret it. So it tells me that maybe we need to, it would be a better idea if we took the ingredients of the song and tried to look at it in different ways from different vantage points. I've kind of created a scale, my own sort of scale that's unique to the song. And I've done this by using the bass notes of the song. So if you know the song, it's one of the reasons people learn giant steps is to understand the bass, the movement of the bass line. Sometimes they're called Coltrane changes, but up a minor third, down a fifth, up a minor third, down a fifth. That's kind of the pattern. So the pattern: B major 7, D7, G major 7, B flat 7, E flat major 7. So it's key of B, immediately modulates to G, 5-1 in G, 5-1 in E flat. Excuse me, 5, yeah, 5, right. Then 5, 2-5 in G, 5 of B flat. What are we doing here? Easy to lose your place. E flat. There we go. That's kind of a 2-5 in G, 5 of E flat, 5 of B. There's always 5, 2-5 in E flat, 2-5 in G, 2-5 in B, and then 2-5 in E flat, and then you're back to the B. Well, if you look up here, the chords, these are all the roots of the chords, okay? And I've kind of arranged the notes in a kind of a scale, right? And then what I've done is I've created a mode for the scale so that it would work throughout the entire course of the tune. So the mode I've created actually starts on F sharp instead. I'm kind of using F sharp as the root. And I'm doing kind of two, you know, I'm really into these tetrachords. So so F sharp up to B, right? That is a perfect fourth, right? And then right, and then there's another, right? So C sharp up to F sharp. There's another tetrachord there. So you have this, that kind of perfect fourth there, and then you have this, right? Those clusters of notes. So I think next time I'll just give you a little teaser, like, oh, what am I going to do with that? Well, what I'd like to do is kind of create more of a holistic, more of a three-dimensional kind of holographic view of the tune, as opposed to thinking in a kind of a two-dimensional way of just scales and chords and trying to outline the chords. You know, that can be very that can really fall flat really fast. So try to think of how, you know, how could all these, like a Rubik's Cube, you know, how could all these ideas, all these chords, all these bass notes, all this root movement, how could it all fit together to make one thing? Because that's really what a great tune is. It's one thing. But I don't really have enough time to get into all of that now. So if you want to hear about it, I will do it next week because I like you. Okay. Well, time's out. Gotta go. Good to experience another lesson again, and I will catch you guys next week. Until then, arrivederci.